Introduce me. So my name is Tetsuya Nakamura, and I belong to CableLabs for almost 2 years. And I'm now come back to this community again after I changed my company from a previous company, NTT Docomo. And now I moved from Tokyo to United States, and now I'm part of the cable industry from a mobile industry. And now I'm come back to this ETSI NFV community as well as open source and this NFV World Congress and SDN World Congress. That's my pleasure to be here on behalf of CableLabs as well as. But today's talk is more focused on our achievement and what we are now doing inside the ETSI NFV is because many of you already are aware of that ETSI NFV is the home and the foundation of the NFV, and that's exactly 5 years before in the same day today. Venue is not in here, but this was a very, very first time to introduce the NFV as a new keyword in the whole industry. And I was one of such a founding member in the ETSI NFV on behalf of NTT Docomo at that time. And after I changed the company, and I still fully engage into ETSI NFV as well. Today's talk is more future business, future NFV vision looks like. More particular saying, that's network slicing. Because many people, network slicing is a term is not so new, because research and the prototyping and the POC or even field trial are already happening in all over the world, in not only just this year or last year, but whole long years. And I think that's one of the such prototyping and the POC will be introduced by next speaker, my former colleague Ashik Kron. But today's my talk is more focused on how NFV can be mapped with the network slicing. So let me start my talk. It's not so long. So couple of you may remember ETSI NFV 23 network operator inside the ETSI NFV network operator council co-authored and published the white paper in terms of NFV priorities for 5G. And if you don't have take a look at before, so please download it. And inside that white paper, co-authored by 23 network operators. So we figure out, so what's the operator's perspective in the context of the NFV, especially because many people saying that 5G, but 5G is not only just evolution of a radio access network, but more than that. Especially how 5G may impact, should impact in core network side as well. So this operator's white paper is more focused on what kind of NFV key feature should be addressed in the context of the 5G use cases. And in that white paper, we identified a couple of distinguished key features, and network slicing is obviously one of them. And regarding network slicing, that's inside the white paper, we say 5G use case and environment implies very, very high scalability and ultra low latency and massive IoT and ultra high security and reliability. Those kind of nature is already, it's not new because everyone already knew that. And even not only just PowerPoint text, because many people even in downstairs, many of the vendor and the operator already demonstrated how it works. And of course, network slicing is many people understand what network slicing looks like. However, I'm just curious. Do we fully understand what the network slicing is? Because network slicing terminology is almost a buzzword, but it's quite difficult to define in the very unified and single definition. And it's quite understandable because network slicing is not only unifunctional features, but everything is based on more contextual. Because network slicing is fully dependent on what the network service is. Because given that each domain and each organization and company and academia has totally different target understanding in terms of the target network service is. Given the fact that understanding environment and the target application or network service is totally different, why don't we or can we define unified and single definition of what network slicing is? It's almost impossible, and I don't think it's not fragmented because of that reason. And network slicing is also very end-to-end, not only just one function block or one capability, but network slicing need to secure end-to-end network service and resource isolation. So in this sense, I think it's quite difficult to define something. If I ask you everyone one by one, so what's your understanding of the network slicing? Many people saying a very similar answer in terms of this kind of high-level answer. Oh, network slicing should be ensure end-to-end such particular capability to meet some particular service requirements. Like some particular slice is meet for ultra low latency, some others for very high secure for public safety, for example, and some other slice meet more massive IoT application like automobile. In this level, I think many people have the same understanding. However, as I mentioned, if we more dig into one level detail, what the real system architecture looks like to secure their network slicing is. It's obviously it's quite different. And in this sense, ETSI NFV decided not to define anything new network slicing definition is because it's almost make sense. Instead of that, ETSI NFV as a community, because that's ETSI NFV is a home of the NFV, how NFV as an enabler, key technology enabler can help to achieve network slicing capability in the context of the different service region or domain. Because even though each organization or SD or Horus definition in the network slicing is slightly or totally different, but my belief is as long as I see all the definition in the white paper or technical paper, many people is very supposed to or assume to virtualization in general, or more particular saying NFV and SDN will be a more fundamental key enabler to realize something like a network slicing. So in this sense, ETSI NFV decided to not to define any new definition of the network slicing, but try to gathering all the related network slicing use cases already defined or described in the any SDO and HORA, and including a 3GPP or ONA or 5G America or TM Forum or MEF or BBF and 5G. Many of the organizations, and small cell forum, many of the such a guy, and even nowadays in many of the open source community also try to define and implement network slicing. And as long as I see there's so many open source community, because they are more targeting of 5G, their definition of the network slicing also different from NGNN or 3GPP or small cell forum or TM forum or BBF or MEF. So that's very interesting. But ETSI NFV will try to understand how such a different definition of the network slicing, more end-to-end service context, can be mapped with the NFV construct. And if necessary, ETSI NFV need to enhance the NFV architecture and the corresponding reference point or interface to support the network slicing capability. So that's now we are doing. After 23 network operator published a white paper in February in time for Mobile World Congress this year, last Mobile World Congress. And then this technical report with some recommendation. Recommendation is a very initial analysis and investigation how each organization definition in terms of the network slicing can be mapped or related with the NFV architecture and the corresponding reference point. And this kind of a white paper, not white paper, sorry, report, technical report will be published soon, I hope. Maybe by the end of this October, this month, it's almost very close to completed. And after that, in parallel, we already get started to dig inside. Is there any real normative requirements is necessary to support the network slicing capability derived from any other organization? And one of the very significant and most attractive comparison for use case analysis will be 3GPP. Because even though many people came from a different organization or industry, but in the context of the network slicing, still it looks like a majority will be came from 3GPP and NGNN. Because NGNN, as long as I remember, NGNN 5G white paper is the first paper to be published to define or argue on their network slicing. And after that, many of the organizations refer their network slicing. And especially in the 3GPP, it's very, very keen. and in the SA2 and SA5. And inside the TR28.801, they explicitly define what the network slicing is in the context of 3GPP. And you can see, if you are familiar with the 3GPP, this is a very, very common and popular diagram in terms of an information model. But in the context of 3GPP, they explicitly define network slicing contain one. So this is a network slice information box, and this contains one or more network slice subnet, and each network slice subnet in turn contains one or more network function or network element. And in the context of 3GPP, how to interpret in the context of the NFV is this network function will be correspond to VNF, that's a virtual network function or physical network function. This is a very typical information model diagram in the 3GPP defined. On the other hand, ETSI NFV information model is quite simple. If you are familiar with ETSI NFV in the Mano spec, very simple. Because in the context of the NFV, we mean ETSI NFV define what the network service is. Network service is contain one or more virtual network function and or physical network function. And the network service itself might be built in the modular manner or then combined with the more nested nature in the recursively. So this is a very simple information model diagram defined by ETSI NFV. And given that 3GPP terminology and the ETSI NFV terminology are slightly different, but our initial analysis and understanding, by the way, what's the relationship between network slice versus ETSI NFV network service, is our initial conclusion. It's not completed yet, so it might be changed, but almost fixed it, is network service is quite more resource view oriented in the context of the network slice. And the virtual resource for the slice subnet and their connectivity to the physical resource can be represented by the nested NFV network service or one or more VNF and PNF directly attached to NFV's network service used by the network slice. So it means network slice function block or network slice subnet might be linked to network service as a resource viewpoint. So that's our understanding and interpretation to how to map with the NFV construct. That's quite straightforward and not so controversial, as long as we only stick on the engagement with 3GPP. However, as I mentioned before, that's still continue. From architecture point of view, how network slicing subnet or network slice subnet management can be mapped with the NFV architecture. It's a little bit difficult question, but we still believe that's still a very initial analysis of our study result, but it might be affect to the this OSMA reference point, which is defined by Mano and ETSI NFV. And this particular reference point can be used for interruption between 3GPP network slicing related management function and Mano. Because 3GPP slicing related network management function contains three components. Communication service management function, I don't explain detail, but this management function defined by 3GPP might be part of the OSS and BSS, but not limited. Because some vendor or operator prefer to isolate it from existing OSS and BSS in terms of to management function to capable for network slicing. But some operator and vendor may prefer to integrate it inside the existing OSS and BSS. In any cases, from a Mano and ETSI NFV point of view, it will be only affect to that particular reference point. That's a northbound or westbound from a Mano or NFV orchestrator. And this is one of our first initial study result. And now next story is totally different. Some of you may already knew from SDN point of view, because in ONF, Open Networking Foundation, defined SDN and the corresponding SDN architecture. And a couple of you may know their latest TR, TR526. Inside the ONF published TR526 defined network slice is. in the context of SDN controller. That's very interesting, right? Because even though terminology is the same, so meaning is totally different, but it fully makes sense because as I mentioned before, because from SDN point of view, what's the meaning of the resource? It's totally different from ETSI NFV or 3GPP we define. Because from SDN point of view, network resource is most likely like a network capable processing power or some a floating table in the network element and the switching capability and so on. It's totally different. So even in the service definition is totally different because most likely in the how to secure the end-to-end packet forwarding is the most rational and the main point for SDN controller. So in this sense, in their definition, it's a relationship between ETSI NFV and SDN and ONF defined network slice context is quite simple, not simple, but this kind of a relationship might be possible. It's just one of the interpretation by ETSI NFV side. It might be controversial from ONF side, as I guess, but because ONF clearly defined their client context. Like a client context provide the complete abstract set of resources. Again, resources does not totally different meaning from a 3GPP or ETSI NFV defined. But resource and supporting control logic for constituting a slice, including a complete collection of related client service attribute. In this context, in the ONF, client context is most likely a service scenario itself. So that's why we map with this client context into a network service itself. On the other hand, so they also define the service context. Service context defined to contain everything necessary and sufficient for controller to interact with a group and underlying resources, including a network element and a floating table and a processing power for a network element and so on. And then resource may be a combination of the categories of network, storage, and compute. So it's very similar understanding and the division which ETSI NFV are doing as a NFV infrastructure and the corresponding VIM. Those kind of very simple mapping may be happen. And this 3GPP and ONF mapping is just an example. But you can imagine each organization defined a totally different meaning or slightly different meaning in terms of network slicing. So how to understand to map with ETSI NFV framework and corresponding reference point need to be required to understand correctly. On the other hand, we also study not only just how to map each other, but also we carefully study about a couple of use cases. We are not defining or creating any new cases, but we just analyze, pick up a couple of typical network slicing use cases from an outside body. And this is just a list of the use cases. I have no time to explain one by one. But as a result, as an initial result, we conclude that potential impact to the NFV context, NFV construct, and architectural framework will be, as I mentioned, mainly this particular reference point between OSS, BSS, and the NFV orchestrator, or MANO itself. But not only that, most crucial, important things, as long as we observe, is security and reliability. Because given that one of the most significant and important features to enable the network slicing is how common resource can be isolated, secure. So very security expert is very, very concerned that. So because many of the vendor or POC or field trial already say each network slicing not affect each other. Is that really? Because in some aspect it's true. But again, network slicing is not only one particular function point, but end to end. So how to secure the resource isolation for any security reason or policy reason is very, very important. And the reliability is as well. Good news is as long as our initial investigation and study and analysis from many of the organizations that defined 3GPP and the ONF and so on in the network slicing, many of the such use cases already it's quite easy to handle by ETSI NFV. It means current ETSI NFV architecture and the corresponding function block and interface and the reference point might be not necessary to change anymore to support the network slicing capability. However, as I mentioned, some further study is still necessary, either whether it really have any impact to enhance something in the existing spec or not. And security and reliability is very, very key. Thank you.